Thanks for coming out this evening. I'm Jim McDevitt, Interim Law Enforcement Director. I'm happy to see you folks. Quite frankly, we were real disappointed at the last public Compstat we had. It was downtown, which means it's hard to park. It was in about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning in City Hall. Great venue, but I can tell you right now, the audience here, believe it or not, is about twice or 3 times the size of what we had down there. Our idea here is to bring these more out into the neighborhoods, West Central, East Central, try to make it more neighborhood specific, try to answer a lot of your questions, try to tailor the Compstat toward this area and make it a little more interactive and again, take advantage of places like this, your great community center. So Tom is the showman here, so take it away, Tom.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. Appreciate you coming here. My name's Tom Hendren. I'm currently the captain for the North Precinct. So I have everything as far as our crime control and our community policing on the north side of Spokane. Tonight, in this presentation, I'm really going to be talking about the northwest side of town. If there is somebody from the northeast that wants to ask a question, I'm more than happy to answer it. And if there's any south questions, I have our 2 other precinct commanders in the back of the room. But that's the focus of tonight, so it's going to be about not only West Central, but everything here on the northwest side of town. So real quick, that's my list of personnel to give you an idea how many people are directly assigned to our precinct. We have 4 NCOs, we have 3 detectives, I have a lieutenant, and I have my desk officer who is also doing some crime prevention for us. So one of the things about this, this is a little different than our internal Compstat, but I want to give a little bit of what is Compstat for us. It comes from the idea of computer statistics or comparative statistics. It actually started in New York, but the 4 core components that's used in most agencies that have it, we follow the same thing: timely and accurate information, rapid deployment of resources, effective tactics, and relentless follow-up and assessment. So for the accurate information, we rely on our patrol teams every day. The sergeants will complete a report that they will send to the reporting group, which consists of all our crime control folks, crime analysis, investigations, that documents whatever intelligence, specific incidents, or anything that may be useful in our strategies going forward. We also have field interview reports. Our detectives are constantly churning up new information that we share with the group. Citizen reports, complaints, calls for service, and things that come into crime analysis are huge. That drives a lot of what we do, and that's one of the points I want to get across here tonight is we need that information from the community. You know, call Crime Check. Even though you think nothing's going to happen, it actually does, and I'll explain that a little later. Confidential source information as well as a lot of open source information. So for deployment of resources, our biggest resource in the department is our patrol division. But we also have, within that, we have our patrol anti-crime teams. We have 2 of them, and they're a proactive set of officers that go out and target specific crime trends or specific groups or individuals that are responsible for a lot of our activity. We also have several investigative units that we utilize from the Targeted Crimes Unit, Special Investigative Unit, our Major Crimes Unit, as well as our Property Crimes Detectives. The neighborhood conditions officers, they are really the point person for our problem solving in our neighborhoods, and we'll talk a little bit about what they do later. And the civil enforcement unit, which is a new unit that was started here a little over a year ago, and that is really a support unit for these other mechanisms or these other units to help them be able to accomplish their mission. And I'll explain how that works here in a little bit. So tactics. One of the things you're going to hear about is hotspots. What is hotspots? I'm going to go into that. But hotspot patrols, we use foot patrols, bike patrols, undercover, a lot of different things. One of the new things that we brought to our precinct is CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. And that's an idea of actually looking at the actual physical location and how can we better construct it, or what changes can we make to deter criminal activity. Collaboration with interested parties, and that's a big part. Working with our business owners, our land, our property owners, our concerned citizens and citizen groups, as well as our other partners or agencies, whether it be in government or in the private sector. And then our chronic drug and nuisance abatement, or chronic nuisance and drug abatement, are one of our biggest tools. And the relentless follow-up and assessment. This is just some example of entities that we use or that are used for that follow-up. Go ahead and go to the next one. So in Northwest Spokane, so you know what? So I'm not speaking a language you don't understand. We have it broke up into 2 patrol groups or districts, and that's based on. the geography, it's not based on geography, it's based on the number of calls for service within those areas. So our P1 area is actually a very large geographical area. And that consists of the Indian Trail area, 5 Mile, Northwest, North Hill, the Audubon Downriver neighborhoods. And Doug Strozel's our NCO for that area. He's located up in Cop-Shadle at Shadle Center. And then the P2, which is this West Central community in the Emerson-Garfield area, that is a smaller geographic area, but it does have a higher calls for service load. And our NCO for that is Tracy Douglas, located at Cops West. And I've got her phone number there, by the way. She is absolutely awesome, and I love what she's done for us here. So to give you an example, this is the geographic area for P1. I mean, you can see it's a very large area going up into Indian Trail, down here south of Garland, down here into the Audubon Downriver area. And P2, as you can see, a smaller geographic area, but it also does extend out there to the area out by SFCC. All right. So one of the questions I get a lot when I go talk to community groups is about what is our patrol staffing? How does that look? Well, right now, the way we're currently staffed, our patrol teams are split between north and south. The river is the dividing line, and it's based on just geography. We have 16 patrol teams, 8 north, 8 south. We have 4 shifts, and you can see the number of officers I have listed there for the north side teams. So you have between 7 to 10 officers on each north side team if they're there. But understand, per shift, each day you have 1 team working the north side. They cover everything north of the river. So that's northwest and northeast. And it's ideal if you have 9 officers there, but that doesn't take into account training, vacation, injuries, administrative leave, what have you, that can impact staffing. North teams are staffed heavier due to the calls for service. As I always remind my south counterpart, about 68% of calls occur on the north side of town. So we do staff our north teams, particularly it's kind of an average of north-south, or north has 9, south has 6. And then we have, with the 4 shifts, swing shift and power shift are overlap shifts, so they overlap with each other. Swing shift overlaps with day shift as well, and power shift overlaps with graveyard. But there is a period of time where day shift and graveyard are standalone shifts by themselves. And then, like I said, our north officers cover the entire side of the north side of town. So our hotspots. Each week, we select 2 hotspots. That's what our patrol captains requested we keep it at due to our calls for service load. The area captains will get together with their crime analysis, and they'll look at the current intelligence data, crime data, and what we think is the most active areas, and then we will select those areas as hotspots. Those will be created as new incidents. Every Tuesday we throw out new hotspots to patrol. They will go on the incident waiting screen. As an officers have opportunity to do it, if the calls allow for it, they're to check in periodically throughout their shift, 15 to 20 minutes in that area, and they're looking to basically just do police work in that area. They're going to enforce the laws, the traffic laws, other violations. They're going to look for suspicious activity, suspicious persons and vehicles, and if they have probable cause or reasonable suspicion, they're going to make contacts. We also utilize prowl checks. Occasionally we'll have a location that's either a really active criminal location or it's been victimized quite a bit that we'll spot check. We have special enforcement details. Example, I had some graveyard officers northwest earlier this year spend a couple shifts just working on vehicle prowlers because we were getting hammered. And they didn't make any arrests during that 2-day special, but they identified about 3 different locations and a couple people that we suspected were involved, but they were able to confirm it. And down the road, we've ended up arresting all 4 of those people related to vehicle prowling cases. So it was a good special. But we use foot patrols, bike patrols, plainclothes operations, a wide variety of things. And the big thing for internally is every Tuesday we do a weekly meeting where we get together with all the area captains, investigations, our crime analysis unit, and we discuss what the current trends are. What's the current numbers? What are our problems? Who do we think is responsible? Who are we going after? And we kind of lay out our assignments from there. We come up with a bulletin we send out department-wide that goes out with, for North, we put out 9 active or wanted subjects, our most active offenders based on the current intel. 5 to 10 of the most active locations that we want patrol to focus on. And that can be for either criminal activity or they're just frequently targeted by our bad guys, as well as our hotspots. And then other crime trends that might not fit a hotspot criteria, but we want patrol to be aware of it. So an example, I will give you some examples of some of the hotspot emphasis we've done on the northwest side of town this year in 2016. This was an example of a hotspot that my crime analyst, been sitting in the back there, Jamie McGrath, had pointed out, hey, we had a rash of burglaries all of a sudden pop up just here west of North Central High School. And the blue icons you see on the screen are burglaries. Green are going to be either vehicle prowlings or vehicle theft. When you see numbers, it usually means duplicates. And some of those are duplicates up there, but we did have a rash of about 4 burglaries right there in that area in a couple-day period. So we instituted a hotspot, and after a week, this is the results we had. The one burglary that shows up there actually occurred after the hotspot was mistakenly closed by one of our young patrol officers, and nobody caught that during the weekend between dispatch and the shift commanders. And so the hotspot was closed for 2 days. That's when that burglary happened. So we actually had good success when it was open. Here's another example. This is an area, if you live in Corbin Park, we have a lot of problems with vehicle prowling, okay? And part of it's through the environment there. It's a very dark neighborhood, lots of trees, beautiful neighborhood, but at night, working graveyard there, it's hard to see. That's why I'm trying to convince Vista to put some new LED lights in there, but I've heard some of the residents aren't really excited about that. I'm asking if you live there, convince your residents, let's do it, because it helps. But anyways, this is an example. We saw a lot of activity here. We also have a couple addresses that border the east and west sides of this hotspot that cause us a lot of problems. We put an emphasis there, but during that week, our calls for service were fairly busy. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We had a little bit of results, but it really didn't suppress the activity like I'd hoped. Part of that is if we're not getting officers consistently checking into those areas, we don't get the kind of results we'd like. And some of that has to do with if the calls for service demand that they go to 911 calls, they're not getting into the hotspots. So here's an example of a vehicle prowling, vehicle theft trend that we saw right here just north of where the police station's located, between Cinto in Indiana and Monroe and Maple. And this actually, if I had extended out the map, it was actually quite a bit larger too, but we can only designate a certain size area for a hotspot, and we kind of want to target the center of the activity and see if that has impacts beyond that as well. So we did this for a week. Our next week, that shows one vehicle theft did occur, and then there was an attempted vehicle theft based on the report. But we actually saw a significant reduction not only in the hotspot, but in the surrounding area. Go ahead. So here's my Corbin Park. During that same week I just showed, I didn't have a hotspot in Corbin Park. As you can see, what happened to me. The next week, we did get good emphasis in there, reduced it down to 1 reported vehicle prowl. And here's one last one, West Central, right down here, kind of in the heart where it's been a very active neighborhood over the years, between Ash and Nettleton. Just here during the 419 to 426, that's the activity you saw. Those are a couple burglary incidents. Oh, go ahead and go back. That's all right. Then we did an emphasis here, and we had 1 vehicle theft after the emphasis. And we actually saw a pretty good reduction within that whole general West Central area. This is the last one I'm going to show you. This example, the previous report, our weekly stats up in P1, northwest, the further northwest section, we got hammered. Our stats were through the roof, but it was really widespread. Well, our intel has been telling us that Shadle Center, unfortunately, has been, and Shadle Park has been a kind of a gathering spot for a lot of our criminal element. So we made that our hotspot. And to give you an example, here's some of the crime that was around, and there was multiple incidents there at Shadle Center. So we did that focus. Yeah, the next week, we ended up having 2 incidents in that whole same area, and that robbery incident you see, which is what you see that blue, stick figures being robbed. That incident right there actually involved one of our young persons who is part of our problem a lot of times, who's been arrested multiple times, who put himself in a bad situation with the people he hangs out with that has resulted in a robbery. And that's the case with a lot of our violent crime. The victims, a lot of times in the north side of town, it's by who they associate with and what circumstances they put themselves in, they end up being victims. And then we did have the 1 vehicle prowl. So go ahead and go forward. So that's an example of some of the results that we've had in hotspots when we had them. But like I said, I only have 2. That's what I'm limited to. And I really, with the call for service load, I can't put more than that on the screen. Because right now, as I came in here today, there was about 6 to 7 waiting incidents, and every officer on the north side was tied up on an incident. And both hotspots are sitting there, haven't been touched for a couple hours. That's just the reality of where our staffing's at. If I had more staffing, I would love to have actually a hotspot in every patrol group. And if I had the, a dream level staffing, I'd have one in every neighborhood. Hey, this is our busiest area. Let's focus on this. But we're doing what we can with what we have. So I want to talk about neighborhood conditions and what we've got north. Like I said, I've got 2 that work northwest. First one I want to talk about is Tracy Ponto. Does anybody here know Tracy? Any of the citizens? Okay, I hope you have had good dealings with Tracy. She is a bulldog and works really hard on some things. She was assigned an investigation that a lot of times we'd assign to a detective, but she has such a knowledge of the neighborhood, I actually chose to give it to her to work. It involved a bunch of juveniles, and I think you guys will remember back in January, February, the smashing of the windows, the hoods on the cars that was happening down here in West Central as well as Emerson Garfield. I don't know if you remember that from the news. She was assigned that case, 30 incidents that she, on the initial investigation that were documented. She ended up working that for several weeks. It resulted in filing 18 felony charges total for malicious mischief, felony malicious mischief charges on 5 different juveniles, which each were charged with between 2 to 4 counts, as well as a laundry list of misdemeanor charges. So it was a very extensive investigation. It took quite a bit of time, but we actually were able to identify several of those offenders and get them charged. In that investigation, we identified a group it's called YKS, or Young Killer Squad. A lot of youths. These kids are young as 13. That are involved in this. Officer Ponto, as well as Officer Valdez, who's assigned to the Safe Streets Task Force, which works with the Sheriff's Department, the FBI. They do basically, their really focuses on gangs. They worked this together to help identify suspects, and they were investigating other crimes. Some of them were misdemeanors we normally wouldn't work, misdemeanor assaults and some misdemeanor vehicle prowlings, but they were working those because of just this core group of kids being so involved in so much activity. It resulted in several charges related to assault, vehicle prowling, trespass, malicious mischief. We've also actually charged a couple of these kids with some burglaries. Officer Valdez also partnered with some members of our faith community to actually do outreach with these kids. Going into the homes with the parents. Some of these kids, they're easily manipulated by their peers. Some of the parents were totally in the dark about what was going on. So we actually reached out to try to sit down with them. Hey, this is what's going on. This is the full picture. We need to make a change here. And according to Officer Valdez, he was well received by several of the families. So we're hoping that will have an impact. Because if we can prevent a kid from going down that road, that's a win. But several of them are going to be continual problems. And that's why right now we're looking at actually classifying them as a criminal gang. They're under evaluation for that now. So a quick example of some of the chronic nuisance, which is the bulk of the NCO's job, is working on chronic nuisance locations. These are just some examples of locations. Evictions that were completed after a chronic nuisance was served. Abatement agreements entered into with owner-occupied nuisance. The one there on West Glass, I can tell you that I looked at the document that Tracy had compiled in the list of information, and it was mountains of information to document the chronic nuisance. But they've entered into agreements there, hoping to stop the problem, and another eviction occurred just by working with the landlord, giving them the examples of what's going on. Now, Officer Strozel, who works in P1, this is an example of some of the chronic nuisance he's working on right here, just in 2016. These are houses that we've either had evictions or we got one pending, and abatement agreements that have been entered to on owner-occupied residences. And those are the challenge. The owner-occupied are really the challenge. Because with a landlord-owned property, if we can show a chronic nuisance to the point where we're now issuing citations, threatening to abate, they're usually going to evict their tenant. There's more than enough cause to do it. But when you have somebody that lives in the house and they're the problem, if they're not willing to change their behavior, we're forced into some really difficult situations. So to give you an idea on that, I brought a prop. This right here is an example of one binder for one chronic nuisance abatement up in the Indian Trail neighborhood that took place last year. That's the amount of documentation that the NCO went through just to do one chronic nuisance abatement. So it's a very time-consuming issue. So if you go to the cop shop and you're like, why is the NCO in the office all day? Because they're working on something like this. It is very time-consuming. All right.
Was that owner-occupied?
That was an owner-occupied one up on West Rosewood. We had a lot of criminal activity right there in that Indian Trail neighborhood that was tied right to that house. And since that house was vacated, it knocked out a bunch of the activity. And then we vacated one about 2 blocks away, and it really knocked out a lot of the criminal activity there. So our property crimes investigations. Currently I have 3 assigned to the North Precinct. I would love to have 8, Chief. I have 3. During a good part of 2015, I was stuck with 2, or actually Craig, the Assistant Chief, who was the captain at the time, we had 2 of them working up there due to an injury for most of the year. And to give you an idea of what they worked, Detective Jolly was assigned or worked 113 cases last year. Detective Madsen was assigned or worked 121 cases. Now, some of these cases can be very simple. It might be resolved in a day. Some of these cases can require 4 or 5 search warrants before you're complete, multiple interviews. So that's a pretty extensive workload. And just to give a comparison, I'm not picking on South, so Dave, don't get mad at me. But the South detectives in the same time frame, the 2 of them combined for 109 cases. But I will tell you, Dave does utilize the South detectives for a lot of proactive community engagement that I would like to do. I would absolutely love to do, which is effective in reducing crime as well. But we've unfortunately been very reactive due to our caseload. So I know people will call and go, why aren't you working my case? I will admit, we cannot assign all the felony property crimes. Misdemeanors, I just don't, generally, we don't do it. There are occasions where we've taken some misdemeanor cases that are misdemeanor on their face, but we've made felonies out of them because we were able to identify that these people were responsible for serious trends, not just an isolated incident, but this guy's out vehicle prowling 30 cars a night and he's writing forged checks, he's doing it. We're going to go after those people because they impact the community greatly. Right now, our 3 detectives that we have north are working, been currently assigned 123 cases, and we have charges requested in 28 of those. Of course, that's before today's case assignments, where I think each of them got about another 4 each. So it's been very busy. And CPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design. I wanted to cover this and open this up to the community, explain why we're doing this. I actually had pushed the assistant chief at the beginning of the year. This is something I wanted to do, get officers trained. It's a fairly expensive training, but it's very valuable. It's one of the better programs in the country. So Sandy McIntyre, who's my desk officer up at the Northeast Precinct, went through that training in April. And the idea is for us to partner with property owners to identify those environmental changes so we can try to reduce or deter criminal activity. The evaluation we conduct and the report we give you is free, no charge. We're willing to come out, do this. If you have commercial property that you've been victimized, we'll come out, we'll do it, help you. The only expense that you incur is for those changes you make. Sometimes it can be simple as some lighting changes, some landscaping. Sometimes it's more surveillance, adding windows. It can be a lot of different things. But we have seen where this has been applied across the country. It is effective. It's not the end-all be-all, but it does work. So since she's been trained just in April, she's done one for the Mob Fitness up at 603 East Holland, addressing some vehicle prowling and theft issues, and that's one where I directed her, but the owners there were very open and receptive to, hey, let's work together to try to address that. The Motel 6 on North Division, which we've had a lot of issues with, we're working with them, and the owners, to their credit, have been very responsive in trying to get things done, and they are actually trying to partner with us, but we have a long way to go to deal with that one. And then she's actually done one for a private residence. It was an elderly individual who just moved in. She took the time to go and help her so she could feel secure on what she needed to do to secure her residence. And we've got 3 more that she's already set up. We've had people come in, hey, I hear you're doing this. Are you willing to do it? Absolutely. And I'm using that too when I'm seeing a location that is getting frequently targeted. Hey, Sandy, reach out to these people, see what we can do, what we can offer to them. So last thing I'm going to go through here is, well, not the last thing, but the next thing here is some of our notable arrests. Now, to be honest, I could have sat up here for 2.5 hours talking about all the notable arrests we've had over the last 4 or 5 months. I am not going to do that because I'll bore you to tears. But I want to highlight a couple. This here is Mr. Austin Witcher. Okay? He was arrested in January after fleeing from a stolen car. He actually was caught on the south side of town, but he stole the car right over here at 2500 West Maxwell. The reason why I profile him, and this is the example of what we're dealing with. Since 2013, he's been arrested 8 times for felonies involving vehicles. Along with those, he's been arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm, first-degree robbery, attempt to elude, and possession of a controlled substance. All felonies, some of those very serious felonies. And we're still dealing with him on a fairly regular basis. Here's a couple examples of where you call crime check and do a crime check report and you think nothing happens. I'm telling you, you're wrong. 5 Mile, we had a couple rashes of vehicle prowlings over 2 different weekends. This is one of the groups. There were actually 2 different groups, and we've got cases on both of them. Detective Jolly does this frequently. She's kind of her own mini crime analysis unit. She'll go through scrubbing stuff because she's looking for information for other cases. She stumbles upon some stuff that realizes, hey, this is workable. I've got some things here. She coordinates with the PAC team. They identify these 2 guys, and as a result of what was originally vehicle prowling, Mr. Miles Miller was charged with 9 felonies. Mr. Daniel Jones was charged with 10 felonies, all relating from what was initially a vehicle prowling investigation. But these guys are active everywhere in town, not just on 5 Mile, everywhere. Just to give you an example, and this is another frustration. Miles Miller, this arrest occurred at the beginning of March, I believe. His most recent booking was for second-degree theft and vehicle prowling back in January 14th of this year. And Daniel Jones, when you look at him, he's got felonies dating back to 2010. Very active, excuse me. Then I like to give you an example of people that cause us more problems. Ty Olds, if you ever happen to see him in your neighborhood, call crime check. He's got an extensive property crimes history going back to 2005. Most of it's misdemeanor, but he does have some felonies. He was arrested actually at Northtown, but the reason why I bring it up, he's very busy in this Emerson Garfield West Central neighborhood, as well as downtown. Brad's team is very familiar with him. He was actually arrested after he was caught by the victim prowling the car and then assaulted the victim, and then the victim, as you can tell by Mr. Old's picture, detained him until we could get there. But he's very prolific, but dating back to 2005. And unfortunately, he only spent a matter of days in jail. Mr. Stephen Tipke, another example of a vehicle prowling investigation. He's one of the people we identified through that vehicle prowling special with patrol. They identified this group of individuals. They made an arrest on one of them thanks to intel that we were able to put together on a warrant. Searched him, incident to arrest, found some property from a vehicle prowling. It ended up linking all the way back to him, where he's doing a bunch of fraud with it, and he's been charged with 10 felonies related to that. Unfortunately, he gets booked and he was released the very next day. That's a question you have to bring up to your local judges. We do not set bonds, and we do try to make recommendations from time to time. Our prosecutors have argued for good bonds. I know Mr. Haskell has been very, very proactive, especially with our really prolific groups. But that's one of the issues we've had. We're seeing a lot of these folks that are bonding out fairly quickly. And this crew is another great example of that. Sean Walwork, Lyle Beerbaum, and Jeremiah R. Baker. They were... Detective Jolly had been working a series of commercial burglaries to include one up on the northwest side of town, several northeast, and a couple that actually were down south. She had suspected that it was Walwork and Beerbaum, but did not have enough probable cause to make an arrest. She'd passed the information she had on to our PAC teams. Sergeant Vigasaw's team actually kind of stumbled into these guys after they just committed a fresh commercial burglary south. They arrested them. They developed a bunch more information that we have led us to be able to file charges on the north side cases. But these guys are all very busy, and Mr. Walwork and Beerbaum were given low bonds and were bonded out within a day or two. It was a matter of days. Mr. Baker is the only one that's still currently in custody on this case. And they're extremely busy. Go ahead. So, year to date, where do we stand? God, I wish I could say it was sunshine and lollipops, but it's not. We're struggling with our Northwest crime. On the violent crime for our P1 area, it's up a little over 6%. To put it in context, though, that's 34 incidents year-to-date versus 32 in 2015. Aggravated assaults and robberies are the primary reason for that increase in our violent crime, but there is very, very few random in nature. When I read them, the victim is often very much involved with the behavior that leads to it. Or the robberies, a lot of the robberies are shoplift robberies as well. It's something we see frequently. Our property crime, in the week-to-week, I got to give, that's why I put week-to-week up here. We were down 30% in our week-to-week thanks to the emphasis we did last week in that P1 area. That was great. We're down 8% in the 28-day, but in the year-to-date, we're up 15%. At the beginning of the year, we got hammered hard with the vehicle prowling particularly, and it's mostly the petty theft stuff. And garage burglary. Garage burglary is up. This is why our numbers are up. Garage burglary is up 24%. Larceny, which covers our theft, our vehicle prowling, a lot of our more petty crimes, up 18%. And vehicle theft, it's up almost 24%. But that's kind of a statewide thing, and it's really more in line with our traditional numbers. Last year was really low, and abnormally so across the board. But we are up across the board throughout the city. But residential burglary in P1, good news, is down 16%. So in P2, violent crime is down in P2, which is good. Robbery, which we had a lot of problem with commercial robbery last year, as well as robbery individuals, down 66%. Property crimes, we're up both in the week-to-week, 28-day, and year-to-year comparison over 10% each. Year-to-date is just over 10%. And the reason why? Garage burglary, 13% increase. Vehicle prowling and larceny, the larceny category is up a little bit, 8%, but vehicle theft's killing us. And it's a lot of our older vehicles that are easy to steal that are getting targeted, particularly in this neighborhood. And then commercial burglary is actually up 20% when you look at the stats, but that's really 4 incidents in comparison to last year is the difference. So when you think 20%, you got to put it in context the amount of incidents. So going into our current focus, this week both my hotspots are actually on the northwest side of town. Part of it because I knew I was doing this presentation tonight, and the reason why is we've seen good reductions in some of the areas we've been focusing on, and we saw in the North Hill area a emerging vehicle prowling and garage burglary trend. We actually have a good idea who may be responsible. Somebody we've already put in jail and is kicked out, but it is what it is. For the first quarter of the year, I spent a lot of my focus as the North Precinct on the Nevada-Lidgerwood neighborhood. I will tell you that. So you did get neglected a little bit in comparison. Our crime, it's the densest population I have on the north side of town. Also, I have a lot of commercial district there, and our stats are just very high there, our number of incidents. So almost every week I've had at least one hotspot in that neighborhood. This is the first time in quite a while I haven't. And like I said, I explain why the new trend is. Go ahead. So vehicle theft. This is how I'm going to end my little bit of my presentation. What can we do? What can the public do to help us? Because the reality is we can only do so much. I wish we could solve all the problems, but we can't. And we really need the help of the public. And vehicle theft is the big driver right now, citywide, for a lot of our increases. The vast majority of our thefts are older cars. They're susceptible to shaved keys. And like I explained to people, when they're like, why can't you guys get this under control? It's like, I could walk up with a key, unlock your car, open the door, get in it, fire it up, and drive off right in front of a police officer. What's he going to do? He can't tell that that's, unless he knows, hey, that's Joe Schmo, the car thief. He's not going to know that that's a stolen car. That is hard to prevent from a law enforcement perspective. So we really need the help of the people that own the vehicles. You know, I always say, if you've been victimized once, don't let it happen again. Hey, I'm giving you a chance. If you haven't been victimized, don't be victimized. Here's the way that you can protect yourself. Not that I'm endorsing the club, but the club is an example, or an anti-theft device like that. Yes, they can be defeated, but they do limit some of that, and they're more effective than not having anything, and that's your cheapest avenue. Another thing that you can do, I remember I talked to one of these car thieves years ago, and I said, hey, I had an old Toyota pickup at the time, which was really popular and being stolen, and I'm interviewing him. I go, how would I protect my Toyota pickup? He goes, change your locks, you put me out of business. Because that's all he did, shave keys. And this is 15 years ago I'm talking about. They were doing it. And so you can rekey your vehicle. If you do that, shop around. Don't just go to the first place, because you'll get different pricing. When we looked into it, there was differences in pricing depending on where you go. Another idea is kill switches. I've seen where folks have put kill switches in their vehicle, whether it be to the battery or the fuel pump, some of that nature. If you do that, kind of feel out the person doing it. One, make sure they're fairly reputable and they're not going to go pass it on to their buddy where your kill switch is. And have them change it up and put it somewhere where maybe they don't normally put it, that's hidden. So our car thieves don't know. Because we've actually had a couple stolen with kill switches where they had to have figured out where it was. Big thing though is lock your car. Don't leave spare keys in the car. I see a lot of those every week. Somebody's car gets stolen because of a spare key in it. Never leave it running unattended. Even for all I'm going to do is just run in really quick and buy that lotto ticket. And then when you come out, you better hope you win the lotto because your car is driving down the road. And I'll give you an example. One of the guys that I profiled here, in his previous, before he went to prison the first time, that was his MO. He would stand outside of 7-Elevens, wait for people to go in, take their car, and then go commit crimes with their car. So I'm just saying, not even for a minute. And then vehicle prowling. There's two general MOs that I see on the north side of town. MO number one, it's the total crime opportunity. It's unsecured cars, and a lot of times it's either juveniles. Sometimes it's career criminals, but a lot of times juveniles are walking along and they're trying door handles, and they're just going to take what they can find. And they steal, and when you catch these kids, you're like, why did you steal this stuff? None of it's of value. Maybe it's, a couple bucks and change. But they'll do it, and they'll do it all night long. It's kind of a adrenaline rush. So we got to lock our cars. Don't leave valuables in there, even for a matter of minutes. And here's why this is important, why I say lock your cars. I just read one just today. Left my car unsecured overnight. My .22 caliber semi-automatic Ruger pistol was stolen out of the vehicle. Left unsecured overnight on the street. That's killing us. That's in the wrong hands. That happens so frequently. I see it all the time. Number two MO is the window smash. And generally it's targeting specific property or something they think you have a really nice stereo and that's what they're intending to get. They may not get it, but that's what they're going after. But typically they're going after items in plain view. Number one, purses, wallets, laptops. Things that you would think, yeah, I can see where the bad guy wants it. How many people think they'd smash your window for a diaper bag? They do it all the time. That's why I say don't leave your backpacks, your gym bag with your sweaty gym clothes. Because for a car prowler, it's Christmas. I'm going to open it up, see what I find. Hey, oh, that's not what I wanted. Oh, well, I'll go on to the next. So even empty bags. You have a bag from Macy's that you left in your back seat that's sitting upright and it looks like it might have stuff in it. The vehicle prowler is going to smash your window to see. And it happens so fast. They have tools they can use. Pop the window. Doesn't make much noise. Reach in, grab it. They're gone in 5-10 seconds. Very, very difficult crime to prevent. Very difficult crime to investigate. So those are suggestions for anybody. Lock your cars and put your property, take it out of your car. I'll give you an example. I'm a baseball coach. Right now, the back of my truck, it's got a canopy that locks, but you could break into it. It's filled with thousands of dollars of baseball equipment. And every time I go out in town to go shopping, I unload all of that stuff, set it in my garage, and then I go. Because I don't want my windows smashed. I don't want my stuff taken. And I wish that we didn't live in a world where we have to do that, but that's just the reality of the world we live in. So garage burglary is the other one. I see over 50%. Jamie, wouldn't you say 50% unlocked? Unsecured garages, not locking our doors. I suggest improving lighting. As a former graveyard officer, I really love motion lights. A lot of our garage burglaries are overnight. I love driving down streets when I see motion lights kicking on. Gives me an idea I might have movement. It could be the neighbor's cat. It could be Johnny does dope a lot who's looking to break in your garage. So I want to be able to see those things. And then big thing, record your serial numbers. We get so much stolen property that we know it's stolen that we can't prove, that we find in traffic stops, in search warrants, and just contacts. Take the time. I did this in my house. We got the family together and we started writing down serial numbers. And I recorded them all in on a piece of paper, notebook, as well as on a digital media device. And I've got them both hidden in different spots. But record your serial numbers. That would be a huge help. We'd catch a lot more of these folks if we had serial numbers. And then talk with your neighbors. Nosy neighbors are the best defense for crime. And all the burglars I've caught over the years, it's usually because of a nosy neighbor making a phone call. God bless nosy neighbors. And don't be afraid to make the call saying, I don't want to waste your guys' time. I wasn't sure. Call. And I understand, we may not respond depending on the nature of what the calls for service are, but every one of those crime check calls, they come through. Our crime analysts get them. I get them. You get a license plate on a car that's driving through your neighborhood that doesn't seem right, call it in. It may not rise to the level where we can actually contact them, but that license plate could solve a burglary that we were unaware of at that time. So it's big. Call. And we do look at that stuff. The stuff that goes through crime check, it doesn't just go right through crime check and into a garbage can. It goes through the right hands, and we're looking at that. And as I explained in some of those arrests, several cases solved, all stemming from crime check reports. Okay? So, like I said, report suspicious activity. If it's in a crime in progress, if you see somebody smashing out the window of a car, call 911. That's a crime in progress. If you see a guy walking around a parking lot and he's looking in, but he hasn't done anything, call crime check. Okay? He hasn't committed a crime yet, but we want to know. And if we have officers available, we will dispatch on those. But it's going to depend on the calls for service load. If you're unable to do that, but you want to give some information, the cop shop's another area. Especially if you want to just go in and you don't want to necessarily talk to crime check or an officer. You can go and talk to a volunteer, fill out a complaint form, give that to the volunteer. Also, if you have chronic nuisance houses, I really recommend that. Go file a complaint. But give your name and address, or name and phone number, if you really want something done. I used to say when I was in the drug unit, when I have people call and say, my neighbor's selling drugs. Okay, well, what's your name? I want to remain anonymous. I'm like, well, okay. I go, your complaint is an anonymous complaint. It means nothing to me because you have no credibility with the court. Well, I remain anonymous. I demand you work this. And then I would tell them, I've got people right now that are willing to testify in court against their neighbors. Who do you think is going to get priority? So we won't disclose your name to people if you call in and say, hey, this is what's going on. We're not going to call the bad guy and say, hey, did you know your neighbor said? We're not going to do that. But we need to know that to be able to verify, that we have a named citizen that's actually telling us what's going on. And the big thing is, like on those chronic nuisance houses, a lot of that information you see in that binder is from the neighbors there that took a stand and said enough is enough and worked with the NCO to get it done. And that's the big thing, is we have to work together because we alone can't solve that. It's got to be with the community and that neighborhood. And a great example is the 1823, I probably shouldn't use addresses, 1800 West Montgomery. We just shut one down last November. And that way, I think we had over 20 neighbors that got on board with that, signed affidavits, and were willing to testify in court, and we got that person evicted. And I'll tell you what, that was a great thing for that neighborhood, because that house was a den of thieves. It was a total danger for that neighborhood. So, one real quick plug for our outreach. We're doing the Police Activities League this summer. It's going to be here. They're actually doing a part at Cannon Park, July 5th through August 9th. So there's a flyer. We'd love to get that information out there. There's the activities are going to be involved. There are swim lessons, basketball, running clinic, flag football, and soccer. So it's registration's $10 a player. They receive a T-shirt, and there's a celebration lunch later at Liberty Park on August 18th. So just putting that information out there for you. And real quick before I go to questions, I am going to open up to questions. Steve Wool from Major Crimes Unit, Lieutenant Steve Wool, is going to give a quick summary of some of the investigative stuff that's been going on. All right, thanks, Steve.
Good evening. Like Tom said, I'm Steve Wall, I'm a lieutenant with the police department. I currently work major crimes and special victims unit, but I'll kind of tell you a little bit about our whole investigative building, what we do. So Tom covers a lot of the property crimes and different things that they deal with. We deal with the undercover drugs, the gangs that Tom talked a little bit about, targeted crimes where we actually focus on the offender, and then on top of that we deal, like I said, with human trafficking and special victims unit. So that's kind of what we deal with. Tom kind of covered a little bit about the YKS, which is the Young Killer Squad that our guys are currently working. These are youth, like Tom said. These are 14, 15-year-old kids who are just kind of starting to come into the game. And fortunately, we've got a great partnership with the Faith-Based Alliance, specifically Pastor Sean Davis, who's working with providing these kids outlets and things resources to the families. And so we really partner and really enjoy that partnership with those to try to keep these kids from ending up on these slides, unfortunately. And then I will cover some of the investigations that he talked about. There are many investigations going on that I can't discuss, of course, undercover operations. So just because I'm not talking about it doesn't mean we're not out there actually working drug houses and trying to shut places down. Just some of the things are active, so therefore I won't go into the details with them. The first one we have, this happened in this neighborhood, and that's why I put this up here. This happened last September in 2015, but we recently got a conviction on it. This gentleman confronted Michael Gerke here confronted Christopher Pinheiro not too far away at Maxwell and Adams. I think probably you guys were aware of it. This was a fight that ensued in the street. Evening time, kids around unfortunately witnessed this. Fight ensues between these two gentlemen, hammer and knife. Mr. Gerke is the one who actually stabbed the other gentleman, cut him several times, and Mr. Pinheiro unfortunately passed away. So this happened in September. We just recently went to court on this. And Mr. Gerke was convicted just about a month ago of first-degree manslaughter and just received 124 months. So this happened in this area. So I kind of wanted to cover from start to finish what had occurred with that one. This next case is another one that happened up in this area that we dealt with not too long ago, March 20th of 2016. This was a homicide that occurred over at 525 West Cinto. This was a robbery gone bad. This was a situation where a gentleman had ordered a couple prostitutes, and they came up and with the whole idea of robbing him. So they were set up to rob him for drugs, potentially money, and they set him up. We would have not had anything originally had it not been for some video cameras that were in the area. But that gave us a quick step into the investigation. Along with that, we were able to get some information from the victim's phone, which led us to these 5 individuals. But these guys target somebody who could have been anybody for a little bit of money or a little bit of dope. And so this stuff goes on in our neighborhoods, unfortunately. And so we're combating it. We're working with the precincts to make sure we're giving these guys great convictions and times so that they don't come back out and victimize other people. But this was a case that took a lot of time. A lot of my detectives in major crimes were on this for an extended period of time, wrapping all 5 up, plus the paperwork, and now we'll start the court process in the next 5 to 6 months, hopefully. Next one is a gentleman that lived in this area who may have victimized a lot of your neighbors. This was a gentleman who, Jonathan Toth, who made threats both to law enforcement and to the public at large. He was threatening people, assaulting people, and was let out, ran from drug treatment, and was out just a one-person crime spree. When we arrested him, our targeted crimes unit focused on him due to his violent past, focused on him, caught him, arrested him, and he actually had a gun on him at the time. Who knows what he could have used that for? And so this charge we then took federal, and he pled guilty, and he's going to get 56 months for his conviction, which will be all 56 months when it goes federal. The next is a repeat offender who we have talked about at many of our Compstats. People know this name by heart. This is Tommy Tofsrud. When he is out, he is victimizing you guys. He is stealing. He is stealing bikes, chainsaws, and taking them to pawn shops, doing whatever he can because he's got a drug and heroin habit. And so when he is out, he's victimizing us, so he became part of our repeat offender club, which means we target these guys. We go out there and we hunt them down, we make contact with them, we provide them opportunities early in life, and that's kind of what we'll talk about in a minute. But this guy has decided at his age he does not want our services, and so he'll continue to victimize each and one of us every day. And so he was picked up not too long ago at Ashland, Indiana, walking around with 8 warrants. And so had we not picked him up, I'll guarantee somebody would have been missing something that night, and Tom would have been reading that report that day. So he was another one that we picked off. Another chronic offender that Tom's aware of. This gentleman doesn't have a lot in his background, but he was recently convicted of residential burglary and second theft. He was given a 90-day sentence. So he broke into somebody's house, and he got a 90-day sentence. He's back out on the streets.
And there's something to add to that. On top of that, we sent over a laundry list of charges on him related to possession of stolen property, whatnot. And these were, I think that was the resolution for all those charges. What happened is he got 90 days.
So time served. He's back out on the streets.
He's back out on the streets.
And so Tom kind of alluded to people that are out doing things again. We're watching him. He's part of our chronic offender now because he's out there causing crimes. And so we're going to do everything we can to send him back to jail.
If you see him in your neighborhood, please give Crime Check a call.
So even though we work in different buildings, I'm working with Captain Hendren on a regular basis, and his detectives and his officers are coming in, passing information. We really are a joint team. We just are housed differently, and we work different crimes, but our crimes all come together. So we work quite extensively with the precincts, and so we're in this area all the time. There are drug houses here that we are working on a daily basis. You may not know it. You may not see us driving around in the plain marked vehicles, but we're here, and we're hitting these guys, and we're doing what we can, sending up through the civil enforcement unit so that we can abate these places and hopefully shut them down and get them out of your neighborhood so it's a safe community for your kids and your families. I think that's it for the investigations, Tom.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. All right. Well, thank you for sitting and listening to all that. Right now, I wanted to be able to open it up for questions. I always like the opportunity for people to be able to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Yes, sir?
Yeah, two questions. One is, where is Kendall Yards?
It's in P2. Kendall Yards is part of the P2 patrol group area.
And how are they doing?
Actually, we've had a few vehicle thefts and a couple of vehicle prowlings. We've actually had very few incidents down there. We've had a couple of commercial burglaries, but we actually made arrests on those. When you have good alarm system and we're able to respond, we were able to take care of that. And of course, we had the one where the stolen car smashed into one of the businesses down there after a kind of a loss of control. But actually, it's not been that bad. And generally, this part of West Central here hasn't been where the bulk of our crime is. That lower West Central, we get some incidents here and there. I hate to say it, but the Emerson Garfield area is really where a lot of our numbers come from the vehicle prowlings and garage burglaries. We get a lot of that right there. Yes,
My
sir.
next question is, and I know that, with the body cameras, that's,
yes,
you're still going through that, where it's going to end up. I guess it's as good as mine, but
yeah.
do you have any plans, any future interest in drones to assist?
Well, I know we've had discussions about it, but that's a very hot political topic right now. I know that the city council is extremely concerned about that as far as use of drones by law enforcement. So there's a lot of issues that need to be figured out by related to that are going to be far above my pay grade. Even that's going to be city leadership as well as city legal. I think there's use for drones in some aspects. There's part of me, the libertarian side of me, that I don't really want Big Brother's eye everywhere, But there are times where I think they could be really useful, particularly in a tactical situation where you're talking about protecting life. There I'm willing to say, yeah, that would be a good example. But that's really one that we're still looking at. It's kind of new technology, and it's kind of a new part of the law enforcement. But we haven't made any decision one way or another.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm pretty impressed with the targeted hotspot, the crime rate going down.
Yeah.
What about the surrounding areas?
It's a great point. I know exactly what you're asking. Does it push it out?
Yes.
And you're right. That's one of the criticisms of hotspot policing is, does it just move it to other areas? I will say yes and no. I've seen it where it does. I've also seen where when we hit a hotspot and we're really focusing on a specific area and we good saturation in there, it impacts the greater neighborhood as well. But we will see where it will push it sometimes from one area to another. That's one of the challenges with only being able to do 2 hotspots. Because in a couple of those where we saw great reductions, our numbers in P2 didn't go down. They just shifted to other areas. So it's kind of like, sometimes it feels like whack-a-mole a little bit. Whack-a-mole, whack-a-mole, whack-a-mole. And if I had a few more things to whack it with, maybe it'd be a little bit more effective, honestly. But hotspots are just one aspect. And kind of one of the things about hotspots, there's some patrol officers that you got to kind of point them right where we want them to get them to really be effective. There's other patrol officers that have a gift to find bad guys. And I always said to those guys, go find your bad guys. But there's some officers that, hey, I want you in this area. You know, if drive around this area. This is a good place to look for bad guys. So that's kind of some of the philosophy there. So there's different talent levels in any career. Some officers are really good at certain things, and some of them are really good at finding bad guys, where others are really good at taking a case and working it to the end and doing an investigation that you look at and go, man, you look like you've been a detective for 15 years. So that's kind of some of the concept too with the hotspot policing. And that's one of the reasons why we also put out, hey, these are 10 active addresses where a lot of our bad guys are coming and going from. You get time, pop by them, see what happens. That 1800 West Montgomery address that we got baited, that all started after I had a conversation with my NCO, and she says, please get this out to patrol. So I was putting it out actually on the call waiting screen. Hey, focus on these addresses. One of the graveyard teams, let's go by there. They stop a car. They got a complete violation of the law. They stopped the car. They recovered 8 ounces of methamphetamine out of the car. That launched the investigation, got the house shut down. So that's an example, too, of things we're doing to try to battle some of the crime. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I got another one too.
Oh, I'll go ahead real quick.
Okay, real quick. The vehicle theft.
Yes, sir.
You said lock your car, don't keep it running.
Yeah.
Don't leave valuables. How many cars actually were stolen that were running or were not locked? I mean, that's just like basic stuff.
As far as being stolen themselves, I don't have the exact percentage, but every week I read reports where cars were left running or left with a key in the car that were stolen. And I know Dave sees it. Yes, Jim?
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the first quarter of this year, in the south, of 147 cars that were stolen, 18 of them were either left running or had keys in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some have been stolen twice, where they were stolen, recovered, they can call, complain to the victim, and they wouldn't even come and get it right away, and it sat there for a couple more days, and it got stolen again.
Yeah.
So there's, like the director said, all 3 of those factors
Yeah.
tend to affect.
So there's over 10% right there that are absolutely clearly preventable.
Clearly preventable.
And lock cars, I mean, that's such a simple thing everybody can do, so I'm kind of curious. People leave their cars unlocked?
Yes.
And that.
Every
that's a
day,
highway that's-
All
every
the
day.
time.
And that's a highway that's theft as well. I mean, you've got many vehicles
It's-
stolen because of.
Well, instead of issuing the club, I mean, this issue's here, we thought maybe in those cases we just put a steal me sign on the.
That's a great question, and one of the things about that too with the lock your cars, it sounds simple. I mean, people forget, or people are just lazy, and then one of the excuses, well, I don't want my window smashed out. Okay, I understand that, but if you clear your car out, don't have anything of value in there, you park in a well-lighted area, this, that, and the other, we don't generally see window smashes. Occasionally, where they smash the window, and usually it's a malicious mischief thing, but usually they're targeting specific property. So I don't like that excuse, why don't my window smash? Well, you know what, if you're going to leave your car unlocked with all the stuff in it, I cannot stop that. I mean, I can have cops everywhere, and that's still so easy to do, it's almost impossible to stop. But we see it all the time with the vehicle prying particularly, but even in vehicle theft. You had a question, sir? Yeah.
What would be your dream number of people?
Ideally, I'd love to see a department. I mean, here's the thing. I think we could do some really effective things, somewhere around 340 to 350 officers. We could definitely solve some of the patrol staffing issues. I also, to be honest, and I make no bones about it. I tell the police guild this; they don't like me for it, but I would work to try to change the current shift configuration that they work. I think we can find a more advantageous one, but those are issues for a new chief coming in and whatnot. But even with that doesn't solve a lot of problems. We still have some severe gaps in our investigative division and our staffing. And part of the thing is people say, you know, I've heard a council member say, hey, well, we hired 25 more officers. And I want to remind them, we were down to 265 officers at one point. To give you an idea, my grandfather was the chief for this department back from 1970 to 1980. And in 1976, when he was the chief, they had 274 officers. We got down below that back in, what was that, 2011, 2012? We're down to 265. So we had to just get back to where we were even getting our head above water. The other thing is, part of the issue when you're talking about Use of Force Commission, the Department of Justice coming in with the collaborative reform, both of which have been positive for the department. We've had a lot of good things come of that. One of the things that was pointed out, and Chief Straub, I give him a lot of credit for it, coming in, listening to those that are around him, saying, we need to fix our frontline supervision, because we had gotten, with all the cuts we went through for years, we kept cutting and supervision kept getting cut. And I'm not saying that our people are out there being unsupervised, running amok, but they go faster. They're not as patient necessarily at that time as they are when we have supervisors. Supervisors are calming influences. So part of that accountability is to beef our supervision up. And now we have we have shift commanders again. We have multiple patrol sergeants out at one time. So we're having supervisors on these calls that we need to have them on. Where years ago, when I was a brand new graveyard sergeant, I was out there by myself, with up to 30 people underneath me under my span of control. That wasn't effective supervision. So those are some things that have changed to aid up some of our staffing numbers to where some of our line area still needs to be filled in. We have the accountability. Now we need to beef up that line a little bit. That's my thought. So I'd love to see a 350. You give me 400, I can make it a Cadillac. 350, I can make it a nice Chevy Impala, you know. So that would be my thought. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that vehicle theft is up and it's all older vehicles.
Not all, but the majority, vast majority.
And most of those are probably owned by lower income people.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the neighborhood.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
there any assistance in those people being able to get the club?
We did. We had a grant. We handed out up at the North Precinct since May of last year, 128 of them.
And I
But
knew you'd done that.
yeah, but we've exhausted them. So yeah, that's why I try to give people some. The club is a fairly inexpensive way, but you're right, it's low income. But I will tell you this. When I was in undercover, I worked undercover for a few years. I drove a 96 Honda Accord, best undercover car you could have. You could go anywhere and nobody ever looked at you and thought you were a cop. But I'm going to tell you that car, it'll run forever, but you could steal it so easy. So easy. So I'd love to have one of those just to beating around town. My wife doesn't want me to have more than 2 cars, so we don't. But if I did, I would definitely either rekey it or get a club or something because it's so easy to steal. They're a great car, will last you a lot. A small investment and maybe $100, $150 investment into some kind of an anti-theft. I know that's a big hit up front, but that's a lot more convenient than going through what happens when your car gets stolen. And I've seen Honda Accords where people, just like you're talking about, can't necessarily really afford it. Cars stolen 3, 4 times. And you think about these cars when they're stolen, a lot of times they're basically just drug rentals. Drug users are using it to go from one crime to another. They're using your car to commit robberies, burglaries, more vehicle thefts, vehicle prowlings, and whatnot. So it's basically a criminal taxi, and we want to put those guys out of business. Yes, sir.
Real quick, I had read that car thefts, going back to that, about 5% of car thefts are done by tow trucks, pulling them off. Have you heard anything?
We've had a couple cases like that. I know our task force, Auto Theft Task Force, has actually worked a couple cases on that. I'm not going to get into details because I don't know where they're at with some of those cases. But the bulk of what we're seeing, it's the shave keys. Our most popular vehicles being stolen, Accords, Civics, Sentras, Subaru Legacies, really popular. Camrys, not as much as they used to be. Corollas are still. But now we're even seeing it with the Ford Explorers, some of the older GMs. Even the so-called chip keys. The bad guys, I tell you what, if these guys had worked as hard at figuring out how to steal stuff, curing cancer, they'd cure it in a week. They figured out how to actually use keys on some of these shaved keys on some of the chip keys. You know, the ones that, you can't use not the car's key to start it. We had a bad guy that was stealing them from car lots and using chip keys, shaved chip keys to do it. So these guys are very ingenious. I hate to say it. I give them a lot of credit, but they're very good at their trade.
Is this information available online?
Yeah, and as far as the actual report we put out each week, it's on the website. It's on the city's website, correct, Chief? So on the city's website, you can get, which the general report, there's a copy right there that's going to give you a list of what the current crime stats are, the locations of, the 100 blocks where certain crimes are committed. That's not every crime that we track, but those are the big ones and the ones that we feel that we can actually focus on with our resources to try to impact. It's really hard to stop some of the petty theft calls that we get. A lot of times it's people stealing from their friends and this, that, and the other. We're not going to be able to stop that. That's just bad behavior that you got to get new friends. But we're trying to, especially the stranger on stranger crimes are the ones we're really trying to focus because that's the one that we really want to get after.